Oh, this is nice. Beginning of December. We're back for 2 weeks in a row. I think we're just going to keep going. That's right. We're back, calling and casting, bringing the information and just, hey, the laid back fun that we have. Joining me on the other end today, you guys know him. You guys love him. And I don't know if you know and love him as much as I do because I love whenever he is on here. I brought Glenn back with me to join this show today. We got Glenn in the studio. Glenn, what's going on?
Well, at the moment, I'm trying to see if my fantasy football season is going to continue, but I'm going to set that aside while we talk basketball here. I take basketball a lot more seriously than fantasy football, but from following you on Twitter today, it looks like we may be having the same experience today on the football side of things.
Yeah, you heard go through if you go through my Twitter, you'll see me ranting about the Falcons and Julio Jones. And it's mostly because I'm upset that Matt Ryan. And I don't know if you heard it last week. If you guys go back and listen to the episode, I had a huge rant about why I hate fantasy football just from this miserable season of mine. But we're here to talk basketball. Glenn, last time I talked to you, I believe you were you in Vegas or you just came back from Vegas? You were telling us, giving us the Vegas experience.
Yeah,
Um,
I had just gotten back from Vegas, so and I think you and I have aims right now of going to Summer League next year. Is that still true?
I still have that penciled in. It's getting close to getting a red pen and circling that date, but I just want to find out the dates and everything as soon as I can. And
Sure.
yeah, I really want to go.
Yeah, I intend to go back too, unless work just prevents it. I'll be there.
Yeah. So, Glenn, I'm glad to be talking to you because I just want to get this out of the way real quick. For all the viewers out there listening, Glenn, you have a twin brother. Is that correct?
Yes, identical twin brother. Yep.
Identical twin brother. So for everybody out there in the interwebs, everybody listening, all of our listeners, so you know, I have gotten Glenn and his brother confused on multiple occasions online. And I just want to say to you, Glenn, in person, I am afraid for when I meet both of you guys in person. Please don't mess with me that bad.
We will not mess with you. I actually, when I was 10 years old, came up with a way to style my hair so that everyone can tell us apart. So I won't drag it out too long, but the second letter in my name is L. The second letter in his name is R. And if you look at me and the part is on the left, it's Glenn. If you look at me and the part's on the right, it's Greg. So it's pretty easy to tell us apart once you know that trick.
Oh my goodness, this is like this is like hints from like a video game or a movie that you're telling
Yeah,
me. This
exactly.
is amazing. The cheat codes are in. All right. Well, I'm glad to have you here and let's go ahead and get started. So, first thing I wanted to talk to you about today, real quick, we're just going to go over the Cavs versus the Hawks. Atlanta played the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was a closer game than I thought it was. Um, one of my friends on Twitter, John, he's been on here before. He said one of the funniest comments during the game. He pointed out how Dwayne Wade has every single piece of compression on. He said he has compression sleeves, compression shirt, compression shorts, compression leggings. He's just wondering, he's waiting for the compression headband. So that was one of the funniest things that he
Look,
said.
so he's looking for the compression hoodie.
Yeah, the compression hoodie, waiting for the compression finger wraps. I don't know, but he pointed that out to me. But more importantly, let's talk about the game. The Cavs were rolling. They were on a win streak coming into that game as they came into Phillips Arena. And the Hawks, well, we know how this season is going for us. And they managed to keep it pretty competitive through the game. Did you have any quick takeaways that you saw?
Yeah, the main takeaway was the Cavaliers played absolutely zero defense.
Yeah.
That's what happened when the Hawks won in Cleveland. And I personally think them starting Kevin Love at center is really a pretty awful idea. because it forces LeBron to be the rim protector, and he just can't do that across the whole regular season. It's too much to ask of him physically. But
Yeah.
you saw a couple possessions where he rejected Dennis off the backboard really late. He got Torian one time. So when he at moments where he felt like it was needed, he did step forward and swat some shots. But basically, end to end, the Cavaliers played zero defense. I was just looking. The Cavs and the Nets are actually tied in defensive rating. They're 25th in the league of defensive rating. So it's not really a huge surprise that the Hawks put up a lot of points in both of those two recent games.
Yeah, defense definitely a question, especially when you see our team. No offense to anyone on our team or you fans out there, but you know me by now. When our team is putting up big numbers offensively, you know there's an issue. That should be the first hint for viewers out there like myself that just kind of like question it. Well, that's the first hint. We put up 114 points that game, and whew, I can't exactly say we have the most dependable knockdown shooters or anything on our team. And yeah, Kevin Love at center, it's definitely something that's a thing. Thank you for pointing that out. But
Yeah,
real,
and then when Ilyasova hits like 5 out of 6 shots, I think the Hawks do have some positive shooters like Babbitt's one of the best shooters.
yeah,
Deadman before he got hurt somehow became like the better. I don't know if he was going to try to go into the 3-point contest this year. It's kind of been a revelation. But yeah, across the board, you have mostly average shooters on the team. But with the lack of defense Cleveland was playing, what the Hawks were getting was what I call just comfortable shots. The primary objective on defense is to make the opposing offense uncomfortable and to make them take shots that they prefer not to take, operate
yes.
spots on the floor where they prefer not to operate. Hawks got wherever they wanted and they got whatever looks they wanted, and you give any NBA team 48 minutes of mostly comfortable shots, and they're going to put up a lot of points.
Yes. And I believe this was the first game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first game that Dwayne Dedman did not play due to the is it the stress, the injury in his leg. So we
Correct.
got some John Collins, Luke Babbitt front court this game. And oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that first game. I was concerned about their own defense, and of course, Cleveland did put up a ton of points against them. I in the first half of that game, in the first quarter, Collins picked up 2,000. I put a brief post up on Peachtree Hoops about how his teammates could have helped him avoid those 2,000. He was really rolling early in the game. They could not keep him off the offensive glass. Um, but after Collins left the first quarter with his second foul, Cleveland finished the first quarter 16-6, and that put the game kind of on an offensive trajectory that had the Hawks chasing them the whole game, and that really was a pretty big difference in the game. Was that second foul Collins got, that how much time he had to sit the rest of that first half.
Now, Glenn, I did not ask you to prep for this, so if you could you just give a brief explanation of your Collins team didn't help Collins out with the foul trouble, real
Yeah,
quick?
so his first foul, LeBron was coming down the right side of the court. It was kind of a half transition, not a full transition. Most of the 10 players were back, but he was looking straight at the rim, and Torian had every opportunity to get in front of him. Now, what I will say is it was about the 3.5 mark in the first quarter, and Torian had been defending LeBron on almost all the possessions. So I think he was exhausted. So I think that there's a little bit of, hey, I understand, but Torian gambled for a steal on LeBron, and if you think about how secure LeBron is with the basketball, the only time he really turns the ball over is when he's making those passes that those quarterback style passes.
Yeah.
When he's dribbling, you're not gonna get the ball away from him. But Torian gambled for a steal while LeBron was dribbling, and he missed. And then LeBron just drove straight to the basket, and Collins was the only thing between him and the basket. And well, LeBron weighs 270 pounds, so the only way for Collins to offer resistance was to body him, and he got that foul. But if Torian had just played defense, honestly, he would have not put Collins in the position of having to kind of take on LeBron heading, full steam to the rim. So that one was a little bit more understandable, just because I do think Torian played about 9 minutes guarding LeBron. You're going to be absolutely exhausted. So a little bit of an explanation there, but this about his very next defensive possession, there was a foul call and a rebound, and the lane was really crowded. There were like 6 or 7 potential rebounders kind of right around the rim, and the official had to look back like 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times to try to figure out who actually committed the foul. And with Deadman not being available and Muscala not being available, I would have thought that the whole team would have been super aware that they need to help John Collins avoid any fouls, and especially the veterans that were on the floor at the time, versus with Ilias Sova and Bellinelli, I think should have known that with the referee looking back 3 or 4 times trying to figure out who the call should be um, given to. Any one of those guys could have stepped forward, raised their hand. You see it happen all the time where a guy will step forward, raise their hand, and say the foul is on me. And most of the time, the official will give it to the player that steps forward if there's any ambiguity at all. And no one even showed any situational awareness that he had gotten a foul on the previous possession. So, those are just examples to me of kind of the team just not having the mindset, the competitive mindset, maybe at all times. They go out and compete every game, but sometimes there's some mental things that you see that just drive you crazy. And
Yeah.
all I'm taking was for one of any player on the floor to step forward, raise his hand, say that I committed the foul, and Collins would have been able to stay on the floor. And I think Bud was going to ride him all
Yeah.
the way through the first quarter because he was killing the Cavs on the Hawks offensive glass. So that was, if you want to go see the write up, is on Peachtree Hoops. But it's, to me, as a basketball nerd and kind of a person that kind of watches the game all the way to that level, I was like so freaking disappointed that they didn't help the kid out.
Yeah, for those guys who are not, we'll say for all the new time listeners, stepping out and volunteering to basically call the foul is very common. You see it just about every game. It's about just as common as watching teammates pick up each other off the floor after they fall down. And me sitting here listening, this sounds like I guess you would say rookie mistakes of what's happening. The one with Torrin Prince, I can say that sounds like something a young player would do by mistake. Just because I've done that multiple times in playing pickup basketball, I know I shouldn't gamble because we just need a good defensive possession to force a bad shot. But I'll gamble because I'm not thinking correct or I'm tired. So, yeah, there's that. And what you just mentioned with teammates not really putting their hands up, say, "Hey, hey, I got the foul," knowing the significance of John Collins there. Yeah, just to me, it sounds like mistakes made by a young team.
Yeah, and certainly neither Bellinelli or Ilyasova are young. But I do think with all the injuries that you're seeing 5-man units that haven't played much together, and so there's been so much disruption to the rotation because of all these injuries, and all the injuries are focused at the center and power forward positions. So I do think that you find units that haven't played much together, and maybe that they haven't built up the ability to communicate as much as you'd like. And even Collins has to learn in that situation to turn to one of his teammates and ask them to go take the foul for him. But certainly not going to blame him. He's 20 years old and barely 20 games into his professional career. I put it on the veterans most, but I would hope that a year or two from now, in a game where he's going to have to play center, either him or a guy in a two-way contract like Tyler Kavanaugh was really all they had available. He's going to communicate to his teammates, if there's any ambiguity, please step up and take that foul for me. But it's just it's just something that shouldn't happen. Say the second half of the season, that should never happen. But yeah, we're kind of going a little bit deep on a specific thing, but it was unfortunate because that's when
Yeah.
they really lost contact with Cleveland and they never really got back.
Okay. All right. I did not know who was in the game at the time. If you're saying Ilyasova was there, then never mind. I completely take that back. You're right. You're right.
Yep.
That's a huge mistake and worthy of an article. So everybody go to Peachtree Hoops, check out Glenn's article. So also in this game, we saw the return of pull up my notes right now. We saw the return of Isaiah Taylor. I'm not sure if this is the game he returned, but I do notice he was playing. And as we all know, he was out due to having a retina injury because of a tough practice with a tough defense involved in the practice. So I'm going to lead to this next section real quick, just by talking about that. Is later in that game, we received possibly maybe the worst information that we would want to hear right now, and that is that John Collins got hurt due to two teams playing tough defense towards the end of the game. You just pulled it up and you said to me it was about 3 minutes, 40 ish seconds left in the game. Kyle Korver and John Collins got tangled up, and the result is John Collins has a shoulder sprain. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it was a fluke play. It's interesting because I don't know if you got to see the preseason that the Hawks played in Cleveland, but Richard Jefferson basically assaulted John Collins and injured his
Yeah.
shoulder in that game. That was really
Yeah.
deliberate and malicious, in my opinion. Um, but in this case, the Cavaliers were running with out of a, I think it was right out of a timeout. They were running a wedge screen, which is where a guard comes from the baseline up towards the free throw line and sets a back pick on the big man. And Collins was trying to work over it. And whenever games are late and close, the screens always get a little bit more physical. And honestly, Corver and Collins were trying to kind of navigate each other and kind of keep the other out of the way of the other. And it just so happened that Corver kind of locked up his left arm, and it looked like maybe a shoulder separation. So John Collins is by far the most fun uh, thing to watch on this team right now. And
Yeah.
so the biggest impact, I don't, it doesn't sound like it's serious and it's going to be some like a kind of ongoing issue. Hopefully not. We saw that with Horford, and he had those two major injuries to his pecs. But hopefully, this doesn't become a thing that happens regularly. But the impact to Hawks fans and Hawks viewers is that the most fun player on the team is not going to be able to play for about 3 weeks. It sounds like.
Yeah. And special shout out to the Cavaliers because I believe Horford injured his pec against them as well. Man.
And I do wonder if the player were a Cavaliers player other than Corver. I wonder if we'd be a little bit more mad and taking it a little bit more personally, calling it and describing it as being more malicious than it was,
Yeah.
because it's kind of just like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. And well, Corver did get his ankle broken against the Cavs. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's just interesting kind of history there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, just sad times. Only our greatest season ever watching as fans. But hey, let's move on and not watch Josh cry for 30 minutes on a podcast. So the next game, so John Collins is out. He'll be out. I believe the report was 3 weeks with the shoulder sprain. Don't want to go messing with that because you use your shoulders a lot in basketball. It's not really football, but hey, let me just keep it there. So next game, Hawks took on the Nets. Now this game was in Brooklyn, I believe.
Yes,
I
sir.
actually saw some of this, but did not watch the whole game. And boy, do I tell you, Glenn, I'm just gonna whisper it. I can't even whisper it. I am ready for the Plumlee era. That's right. With no Dwayne Dedman, no John Collins, we got to look forward to the Plumlee, Luke Babbitt, Ilyasova era. Can you hear my excitement?
Yes, yeah, I see. I hear you kind of forcing it, maybe just a little bit.
Yeah, it's going through my teeth
I
right now.
Yeah, Plumlee did look like he was doing good things on the court, but I have to point out that the Brooklyn Nets were playing Tyler Zeller as their starting center, and he is actually a fringe NBA player. And the only reason the Nets signed him was because their first round draft pick, Jarrett Allen, is 19 years old, and they just don't want to ever be put into a position on the season to have to play Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen should only play when it's developmentally useful for him to play. It should not be forced into action. Now, Allen was much more effective than Zeller, but that's not a surprise. So they weren't facing the strongest competition at the center position, but Plumlee is way more athletic and fast than most people realize. I don't know. Well, we'll have to see now because he had foot and knee issues last season, so I don't know if he has the same speed he had a few years ago, but he can really get up. You saw him block a couple shots and those sorts of things. He also looks like he's allergic to the basketball. It looks like he doesn't ever want the basketball either. But I'll tell you a funny story about
Go ahead.
a few
Yeah.
years ago, 3 years ago, I went to Milwaukee to see the Hawks play in Milwaukee. And Plumlee was in the layup line, and he was doing windmill dunks, 360s, throwing it off the backboard and slamming it. And there's a Bucks fan sitting next to me, and he goes, "Hey, that guy throwing those dunks down. Do you know who that is?" He didn't know. The Bucks fan didn't even know who it was. And I
Oh
said,
man.
"That's Miles Plumlee." And they're like, "That cannot be Miles Plumlee." And he was like, but you may remember one of his brothers was in the dunk contest a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
he's not a great basketball player, but he has some. He had before these injuries some serious verticality and was one of the faster, legitimate center size guys in the league too. I have no idea how much of that he'll get back post injury, and the contract is still unpleasant. But when he's feeling good, man, he's fun to watch in the layup line. Like, I'll tell you that.
Oh man, we're looking forward to the layup line. That is is that a sign of things to come when I should be looking forward to the layup line, Glenn?
Well, with Collins on the team, I think I know it's hard to get to Phillips Arena early. I don't live in Atlanta anymore, but I did grow up there. But yeah, it's with Collins and even DeAndre Bembry. He's got some fun craft in that part of his game as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes that may be more fun than watching the actual game with his team. So just if you can get there
Ooh
early and
boy.
see that, you might want to do that.
Whoo boy. Okay. So the Plumlee era began, and fun fact for everybody out there. So I was talking to Glenn during the pre-show, and I said because I missed the Nets game, I looked at the score and I was assuming the Hawks lost because I was looking at the score, and I didn't really, hear much about the game, only to discover maybe an hour ago that the Hawks actually won this game. So, Glenn, how in the world did the Hawks win? As shorthanded as they were up front. Now I know that Jeremy Lin and oh boy, who did they just trade for? Blinking on me right now. Guy from the Lakers.
Oh, D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, yeah. I know they were not playing. So I guess that's kind of understandable. But how in the world did the Hawks win this game?
Well, the Nets took 42 3-point shots and 40 2-point shots. And I honestly don't know how common that is. I'd have to think it's not very common apart from like uh teams coached by Mike D'Antoni maybe. But the Nets do it looks to me like every player on the team has been told if you have an open 3-point shot, take it. Doesn't matter who you are or what your track record is as a 3-point shooter. But they were even them up there. They shot 40% from the 3-point line. So the Hawks were not able really to affect the Nets much on defense. They did kind of close the game strong, a couple of strong possessions at the end. But just like the Cavs game, where the Cavs were kind of letting the Hawks get wherever they wanted and take a lot of comfortable shots. Same was true in this game. The Hawks got a lot of easy shots at the rim, a lot of comfortable perimeter shots from good shooters. So that's what I would attribute that to. So, for example, um, Babbitt was 4 for 6 and all from 3-point range, and I still don't understand how the Hawks got Luke Babbitt on a basically a veteran minimum contract that's not even fully guaranteed. He's such a good shooter. But his when Luke Babbitt who is by far the best shooter in the Hawks is getting wide open looks, you know that there's something wrong with the opposing team's defense. So yeah, just a lot of comfortable possessions by the Hawks, so they put up a bunch of points, kind of like they did against Cleveland, except Cleveland has the offensive power that Brooklyn doesn't have, so they were able to match the Hawks in and even put up a few more points than they did. But a lot of start to finish, the Hawks were comfortable on offense. There was not really a whole lot of resistance for the Nets.
Should I be expecting a W on Monday when the Hawks play the Nets, or reel back on my expectations?
Yeah, well, when I wrote the other piece this week, and we're going to talk about later about the kind of the Hawks' path to whatever draft picks they're getting up with, was I suggested the Hawks fans kind of watch these head-to-head matchups with other teams that are going to be in that same area of the draft, even though Brooklyn doesn't have their own pick. It's still that draft pick is still determined by their record. So, I mean, I want to see the Hawks win only because it would make me feel encouraged about the young guys they have on this team now. But I also accept that they're not going to win more than I predicted before all these injuries at the team. I predicted 32, and that was the most I was the highest projection of all the folks at Peachtree Hoops. Everybody else had them like 25 to 30. But yeah, them dealing with injuries and the fact that none of them are serious. Maybe I hope the Deadman one doesn't become serious. That sounds like one that could become a thing potentially, but he's not a young guy on the roster, but he's new to the team. But them getting kind of they have the second worst record in the league right now, so to even get to like the sixth worst or the seventh worst record in the league was pretty uphill battle. But these games, like these next three games, are huge because Orlando's going to slide back towards that area. So they play Brooklyn and then two games with Orlando, and then they play Cleveland again, which means they'll only have one more game with Cleveland the whole rest of the season. But these head-to-head games versus the Nets, versus the Magic, versus the Kings and the Suns, it could come down to a tiebreaker. So if you're hoping for a high draft pick, you might want to quietly root for an L. But I think the Hawks will probably be a 55 to 60% favorite to win that game in Atlanta, but it's certainly not a foregone conclusion at all.
Oh, okay. 50 to 60% win percentage. Okay, right there. So you basically just described my fantasy football team for half the season. But, we're off of that. So, Glenn, real quick, we're going to move on from the games. And this is something I've been wanting to talk to you about for a while, and I wanted you to get out on air to explain. You have been writing a series of articles called the Dennis Schroeder report. So please explain what that is and how you get your data for that.
Sure. So the objective really is to track his progress towards potentially becoming, for example, like a league average starting point guard. He's not there right now for sure. And the idea was, okay, last season was his first year as a starter, probably not too much expectations in terms of how he's gonna deal with that. He was okay, and the contract still looks okay, not great, but okay. But I think that this team has to figure out if this is their starting point guard for the next, not only the next 2 years, but next 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever number of years. If he's part of the core that they want to kind of ink his name into a young core group of players that they're going to try to grow together, can he be the starting point guard on the next good Hawks playoff team? I think that's an open question. So that's kind of the
Yes.
whole purpose of this bye week. We put it out every other week, and is to track his statistical performance, if you will, against all the other point guards in the league. So the stats that I use, I use two stats to kind of track his efficiency as a scorer, because he is a score first point guard. He does get his fair share of assists in some games, but the Hawks definitely need him to be their leading scorer in most nights if they're going to put up a competitive amount of points. So two stats there. So the first one is effective field goal percentage, and if that's something that's not familiar to you, it's a field goal percentage that it's just like field goal percentage, except it counts 2 point shots as being worth 2 points and 3 point shots being worth 3 points. And so it kind of divides the value and gives you, so like, for example, a guy could be 45% on all field goals and say he's like 48% on twos and 38% on threes or something like that. It's going to build in the value of the 3 point shots for those 3 point shots. And then the other one is one I think is, to me, what may be the most important offensive stat. And what I'm tracking there is free throws made per 100 possessions. And
Oh
so
boy.
Dennis is now he's been an 85% plus 3 point shooter. I'm sorry, free throw shooter. All last season, and he's in that area this season. There's no reason he can't be a 90% free throw shooter. He's a pretty reliable free throw shooter. But because last year he led the whole league in drives, and this year I think he's leads the league in drives. he should be, in the top 15 in the league in free throw attempts, probably, but he's way, way, way off that mark. And so for me, I want to see him start to, when he drives, if a help defender comes over and kind of gets in his way, I want to see him initiate the contact and try to get the call, because that's going to give him easy points at the free throw line that he's not otherwise going to get. And so, so some people would say, well, why don't you just go with true shooting percentages, because that counts 2 point field goal attempts, 3 point field goal attempts, and free throws. And the reason I track it separately is I just think that free throws made per 100 possession needs to go up and up and up and up and up. That's a very specific part of his game. But I don't think he's going to get to being an average offensive point guard if he doesn't like double that in some way as the season progresses. So in terms of offensive efficiency, those are where we have him. And it's interesting because if you go look at offensively,
All
P,
right.
PER is ESPN's kind of account for everything stat, kind of everything all together,
Yes.
and
Yes.
he's 13th in the league among point guards in PER. So that if you just look at that and simply, well, he's top 15 point guard offensively, not quite. The issue with PER is that it doesn't really kind of reduce players that use a lot of offensive possessions. And so, for example, if you break that down kind of in terms of shooting, he's 33rd among point guards in true shooting percentage. So that's not top 15. And he's
So
40.
let me ask you real quick. Um, 33rd, that means that's not even a starting point guard in the NBA.
Correct. I mean, if you
So
rank
that
if
so
you rank them all by true shooting percentage, he would not be in the top 30.
so okay, that is not good, and that's why we need to ask about ask
Yes.
about this report.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
also
Okay. Go ahead.
an assist ratio. So you say, well, maybe his PR is because he's creating shots for others. He's 46th in assist ratio. Um,
Really?
yeah.
So
So the
even
reason
with
he's yeah
oh,
the reason he's 13th in PER is because he's seventh among point guards in usage. So it's just volume. The only reason he's 13th in PR is just volume of possessions he uses for his own play. And there's only point guards ahead of him in usage. The only point guards using more possessions for their team than he is. Listen to these names: Harden, Westbrook, Curry, Irving, Lillard, and D'Angelo Russell, who's kind of like in the situation Dennis is in, given that he was before he got hurt, he was a score first type of guard on a bad team. So, but the other ones besides him, Harden, Westbrook, Curry, Irving, Lillard, those are the only point guards in the whole league using more possessions for their team than Schroeder, and Schroeder's certainly not in that class of player.
so those guys that we know that are up there is household names.
All stars, guys that have their own
Yeah.
shoes, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, guys you see on commercials. Okay. So maybe it is just me. It seems that Dennis's turnover number, him turning the ball over, it just by the eye test, it doesn't seem to be as bad this year as it was last year.
Yeah, I would have to take a look. I want to say that the assist to turnover ratio is pretty much in line with where it was last year. Um, but to the eye test last year, he had long stretches of games where he had a lot of turnovers, and I think what's going on this year is he's having kind of up and down games. He'll have a game with 5 or 6 turnovers, then he'll have a game with just one or two. And so I don't think it's so much that he's fixed it or cleaned it up. I think he just has some games where he does a pretty good job of taking care of the basketball, and he has other games where he doesn't. So that's what I think is going on there. And when the third stat in the Dennis Schroeder report is assist to turnover ratio. So
Yes.
we are tracking that. He does need to cut down on his turnovers and start creating some more shots for his teammates, in my opinion, to be considered to be making progress towards being a league average starter.
Okay, then. Well, this report is very interesting because you got guys out there, myself sometimes, I'll be thinking, oh, Dennis looks okay. But then you actually look at the numbers and you find out, actually, no, this is not good. One thing I do notice with Dennis is just watching him. There are times it seems like he doesn't really try on defense. And I know one of the more interesting stats that I believe Brad or somebody shared out there was that Dennis is like near the bottom, like not even out of starters, but just bottom out of all guards in terms of defensive efficiency.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what Brad had put out via Twitter was he's the second worst player on in defensive real plus minus in the whole league. There's only one player with a worse defensive um, real plus minus. And
that's
when the
not
last
good.
and in this last issue of the Schroeder report I put out, I started including what a defensive metric. I didn't do it in the beginning because defensive stats just need. It's more important to get good sample size on defensive stats than offensive stats, because it's so hard. Defensive events are so hard to track statistically, where offensive events are obviously
Yeah.
easy. You know, an assist is that, I mean, a basket is that, right? But when I the when the before I guess it was before the game with the Nets. No, I guess it would have been before the game with the Cavaliers. The Hawks were 16.6 points per 100 possessions better when Dennis was off the court than they were with him on the court. So that is a ton. That's a massive difference. And if you want to, anyone who wants to defend Dennis as being already a league average starter, his team is not, you know, more than 15 points better as a defensive unit when he's on the bench than when he's on the court. That's not what an average starter looks like for sure.
Yeah. It's looking rough. And I don't know why it is. It just seems like when you watch him, it doesn't seem that bad. But then you actually look at the numbers and it's like, oh my goodness. Well, that is exactly why we need to bring you on here so you can discuss this with us and can tell us, the fans out there, what we should be really looking at. So,
Yeah, so the just to kind of wrap it up, I think the defensive effort has been better of late. They're running I don't know, I'm not going to get into it, but the X's and O's, but they're running a completely 180-degree different defensive scheme this year, and so it's taken a lot of guys time to adjust to that. His first year as a starter was with Dwight, and I don't think that was a constructive year for him. And so I was perfectly willing to give him like the first 20 games to kind of settle in. But that's why I waited until the third issue of the report to add the defensive stuff. And he does need, his defensive effort seems to be there more of as of late. He still has lapses and those sorts of things, but he seems to be trying. But trying is the first step, and then execution will be the second step. But yeah, so basically, what you want to see is him creating good shots for his teammates, him getting himself to the free throw line when there's a defender in between him and the rim. He needs to initiate the contact. And then personally, I think he has every possibility of being a 40% 3 point shooter. It's just shot selection. When when he takes good shots, they tend to pretty frequently go in. When he's forcing a shot, that's when he like consistently misses. So if he could get to the
yeah.
line, if he get to line, say 50% more or 60% more, uh, become a more selective shooter from the 3 point line. And then if he could just bring consistent energy on defense, maybe he starts making progress towards being a legitimate league average starter. But he's got quite a ways to go in all those categories. Well, he's got further to go on defense for sure, but he has specific concrete steps he needs to take on offense to make progress towards that status of player as well.
All right. So, what would you say is a way Dennis could get to the line more? Does he need to initiate contact?
Yeah, so basically, the mentality it looks like to me when he's driving is that he thinks he's quick enough to beat anyone to the backboard.
Yeah.
And but okay, fine. That's a fine mentality to have last year when you're 23 years old and your first year as a starter, and certainly a fine mentality to have when you're 20, 21, 22 and you're a backup. But the term that coaches use is repetitions, right? So how many drives to the basket does he have in his career now? And he should have by now, so it would seem, to have been able to develop the judgment to know whether he's going to beat the defender there or not. And so, for example, the best person to watch, probably the best person in the whole league at this, is Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler will attack. He's not a great outside shooter, but he's a great scorer, and he attacks the paint, he attacks the rim. And if he knows that the other guy is going to beat him or tie, get to the backboard at the same time as him, he initiates contact and he goes to the free throw line. And his mentality is, I'm getting this bucket or I'm going to the free throw line. One of those two things is happening. And it seems like Dennis's mentality is, I'm getting this bucket. And he doesn't have that kind of secondary, okay, if you don't let me get to the bucket, you're going to put my butt on the free throw line. And that part of his mentality is lacking in my view. And because he's such a great free throw shooter, if he doesn't do that, he's really kind of punting on a ton of the value that he could build into his game were he to add that aspect to his mentality.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. He's been doing it for so long, he should know this.
Yes.
That is a very good point. So, as I segue into this next section, we're talking about league average point guards. It just seemed funny that years ago, and by years I mean only 2 years ago, it seemed like we had a league average point guard on our roster, and at some points he was better than league average, at least by my takes. And that's right, we're talking about the former Hawks point guard Jeff Teague, who is currently on the Timberwolves. And as I segue to this next part, you also wrote an article. That's right, viewers, we're getting 2 for 1 today on Glenn articles. You also wrote an article about the Timberwolves report and how they're doing, because it's no mystery that um, our first round draft pick kind of hinges on how the Timberwolves are doing. So go ahead and give a quick overview on that.
Yeah, so the Hawks will get the Timberwolves pick this year if the Timberwolves make the playoffs. So that pick is lottery protected. They seem to be on a path. If the playoffs were to start today, they would be in. But they lose a lot of close games, and as a Hawks fan, what you most want to see is them to basically be the 8th seed in the Western Conference and to hopefully be the team with the worst record in either the Eastern Conference or Western Conference playoffs, because that would give the Hawks basically the 15th pick. It's unlikely that the 8th seed in the West would have a worse record than the 8th seed in the East, but the East is playing stronger this year than everyone expected. So we'll see. But I live, Josh, 20 minutes from Target Center, so I get to watch Jeff play all the time.
Oh,
Um,
lucky.
yeah, yeah. So and they're a fun team to watch this year with the young guys, Towns and Wiggins. Neither of them play any defense at all. So we'll have to. It's strange for a Tibbs coach team, but getting to see Jimmy Butler's play is a lot of fun too. But down the stretch in the fourth quarter, I think they still have the worst net rating in the fourth quarter amongst all teams. I mean, it's between them and Oklahoma City right now. But yeah, there's been like 3 or 4 games that they had well in hand and ended up losing. And those losses, every single loss they can get like that makes the Hawks that draft pick look just a little bit better. But yeah, what we spoke about my twin brother Greg earlier. He came here for the week of Thanksgiving, and the Timberwolves had 4 home games that week, so we went to all 4
Oh man.
games. So I might be able to tell you a little bit more about
What?
yeah, I might be able to
Oh
tell you a little
man.
bit more about the Timberwolves than the Hawks in some cases, because I've seen them play live, and there's certain things you can see when you're live that you maybe can't see when you're watching on TV.
Well, then let me ask you, since you say you are now the Timberwolves expert, let me ask you, one issue before the season started was people wondered how the offense would look due to their starting lineup. How do you think the offense has performed for the Timberwolves?
I think the offense is absolutely fine. It and it's funny because I hope you don't mind the plug, but one of the reasons Greg came was we wanted to kind of cover 4 live games on our weekly podcast. So we put out a podcast called the Full Court Press NBA podcast. Only after you listen to Brad's and only after you listen to Josh's,
Woo!
only after
There
you're
we
caught up
go.
on those 2. If you're caught up on those 2, go give us a listen. We should be your third priority for sure.
You're too
Um,
kind.
no, you guys have well established in this area, so we're just and we cover the whole league, but we wanted to kind of do a different episode and talk about games we've covered live. But in turn, they're good on offense. It's strange because when you see them play live, what you'll see for right now is that Jimmy Butler doesn't care if he ever touches the ball. He doesn't ever care if he ever takes a shot, and he just runs to the corner and lets Wiggins and Towns play. Lets Jeff initiate in the pick and roll with Towns, and I have to think that that's going to be the plan until about maybe mid to late January. And I think what he's doing is he's just giving Wiggins and Towns. If he came in and played from day one here, the way he did at Chicago, he would really kind of stunt the development of Towns and Wiggins. And I think he's just making himself a non-priority on offense just to let them grow. But I think that once they get into kind of the middle of the season, they're going to have to find out a way for him to be a more equal participant on the offensive end. They're about league average on offense, I think. So they're not great. But the story there is that their bench is awful. I mean, they basically brought in Jamal Crawford to kind of maybe try to produce on as many points as
Oh boy.
possible. And as much as fans, I know a lot of Hawks fans love Jamal Crawford. I certainly enjoyed him when he played with the Hawks, especially that one playoff series where he was so good. I can't remember who they were playing then. Maybe you should talk
Magic.
about it.
It was the
Magic. Okay.
Magic. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Um, but at this point in his career, he's really not an efficient shooter at all. And then they have a guy named Bielitsa is his last name, and he is an incredible shooter. He's like 6'10", but you talk about defensive issues with Towns and Wiggins. Well, Bielitsa is. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but he might be the one guy that's worse than Dennis and defensive real plus minus because he's terrible.
Oh no.
So their issues,
Oh.
their issues, their bench. And so I have to wonder if, and I put this in the article. They're only carrying 14 players right now, and they only have 13-year contracts. So I think that they still have like $14 million before they would get to the tax. So they definitely have configured their roster to be able to add someone at some point. And so I have to think that they're going to try to add someone before the trade deadline because they have the roster spot and the space under the tax to do so. So I think they're hoping to find someone to help that bench eventually. And then if they can get in the playoffs and play only like seven player, usually get 7-8 man rotations in the playoffs, then if they're playing, they have a lot of upper tier talent in Towns, Wiggins, Butler, and Teague was really good last year. I don't know if Hawks fans really tracked that, but he had a terrible like first 15 games in Indiana last year, but the rest of the year he was about as good as he ever was with the Hawks. He's dealing with some injuries, so he's kind of playing and not playing depending on kind of game to
Really?
game right now. Yeah.
Oh.
Foot issue, and I think he his last year with Atlanta he fought through like a Achilles type of issue. I think almost the whole season, and so this just may be more of that, and they're just trying to kind of manage him through the season. But if as long as they stay one of the worst five defenses in the league, I don't know how they could ever expect to be like a top 4 or 5 seed in the Western Conference. And then of course Hawks fans hope it's 6, it's not 6, 7, if it's not 7, 8, because that would be great.
Well, according to one of my favorite websites ever, tankathon.com, um, Timberwolves are currently 20th, ranked number 20th. So Atlanta would be getting the 20th pick. And the only team, actually, they are currently tied with Portland, both having 13-10 record. And they're ahead of the Pelicans by a game. So it's a pretty close race to the bottom of the playoffs in the West.
Yeah, it is definitely jumbled in there, and that's another thing that I wrote even in that article about the Hawks draft picks, and they get the Rockets pick as well. That's not nearly as interesting because that's
Well,
probably going to
that's
be 27, 28, somewhere in that range, right? Maybe
they.
maybe 29 even. But when the Hawks play the Timberwolves this year, that might be 2 games that even the people that are on the tank train might want the Hawks to win those games because that would just tag 2 more losses to the Timberwolves that might put them, say, behind the Pelicans or behind the Blazers or whoever they're fighting with towards the end of the year.
Well, okay, all right. Okay, we are done with the Timberwolves report. So we are kind of getting borderlands into my favorite section of all of podcasting with you, Glenn, because I feel you're the only one I do this with. The conspiracy corner. So, first topic for the conspiracy, as I go find my tinfoil hat, put it on, and so should we be worried though about the Timberwolves? In the sense of you saying the Hawks need to win, but I'm kind of worried that the Hawks, excuse me, that the Timberwolves might not make the playoffs. Um, what has you more comfortable in the sense that the Hawks? This is a Hawks podcast, and I keep wanting to say Hawks, Timberwolves, T-Wolves, Wolves, Wolves. What has you more confident in the Wolves making the playoffs than me? Because I'm kind of afraid. Because my mind thought is when the Hawks play the Wolves, we need to make sure we lose.
Yeah, so I say 2 or 3 weeks ago, I might have not put it that way. Um, I might have said, yeah, Hawks need to take L's to help. But really, when you look at the math of the teams that were had a realistic objective of making the playoffs in the Western Conference, the Clippers are way off track because Blake's hurt, Patrick Beverly's out for the year. Um, the other guard they brought over, his name's escaping me now, but I'll think about it in a second. But they have a
Guy from
rookie,
overseas. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the 30 years old or so point guard, is hurt, and so basically Austin Rivers is handling the basketball for them, and Blake's not available, and DeAndre Jordan is typically not very effective when he doesn't have a point guard to work with in the pick and roll. So I think that they have basically a 0% chance to make it. And then in Memphis, the insanity in Memphis, they fired a really good coach, and Mike Conley is hurt, and they basically can't win when Mike Conley doesn't play. And so when you look at the math, it would probably come down to them in Utah, depending on how Utah can navigate this period where they're missing Rudy Gobert. But there's probably only 9 realistic teams in the Western Conference to make it. So, if they're ahead of 500 right now, which is good. And you just want to see them kind of stay 2-3 games above 500, and they're going to be fine, unless like Utah just catches fire and goes on like a 12-2 streak or something like that. But yeah, there's only, in my view, 9 teams that have realistic chances to make the playoffs. That includes like the Pelicans,
Yeah.
who are playing well. They won in Portland last night, but the psyche of Boogie and now that Anthony Davis is hurt, you could see them falling back, and that would get it kind of back to 8 teams. It might come down to New Orleans and Utah fighting each other for that 8th spot. But I think Minnesota's, with Jimmy Butler, just going to be too solid of a team kind of throughout the season, even though their defense is bad, to really be worried about them not making the playoffs. I don't really have any concern about them not making the playoffs. So
Okay, so even with Oklahoma City being on the outside looking in,
yeah, and I think they're going to easily make the playoffs. Oklahoma City. I think they just, I think they have to figure out. I think Russ has to figure out how he needs to play. Last year was Russ just eating as much as he wanted, and they probably had no business winning 47 games last year, but they did. He was chasing the triple double more than he
yep.
was wins typically. So, but adding Carmelo and adding Paul George, they're like the second best defense I think in the league maybe right now, per defensive rating, and so they're just too good on defense to me to not make it. And their clutch play, they have the worst net rating in as NBA.com's definition of clutch play, and that's a pretty unreliable stat. There's a lot of randomness in that, So I'm not worried about the Thunder missing the playoffs either. So
Okay, fair, very fair, very good points. You may have just convinced me that when the Hawks play Minnesota, we need to win, though I don't know if that can realistically actually happen.
well, and we can also put a TBD on this, because
Yeah.
I don't think they play for a while, and we can, when we get there, we'll maybe have a better idea. If they're like on the fringe, we might want to root for the L, but if they're solidly in, we might want the Hawks to get wins. So we can kind of see where we are when those games get here. So
Well, I was going to point out one other injury with the team that might fall. And now that I think about it, kind of to add to that list, Paul Millsap is going to be out for a while.
yes.
So Denver, I believe they're only half a game behind Denver, according to this. So yeah, okay. You know what? You know what? This is why we have to bring the smart minds on the show to tell me where I'm wrong. Okay. All right. Well, second topic I want to bring up as I go around my crystal ball, wanting to just bring up controversy. Do you think John Collins might be out a little bit longer than we think? Should Because you watch football, you look at the Hawks the year they went to the playoffs. Shoulder sprain, while very painful, very difficult. Should it really Do you think it's going to take 3 weeks necessary from him to be out for 3 weeks? Cuz I've seen sports where players play with the shoulder sprain and they're back within a week. Or do you think this is going to be a situation where they're going to make sure John Collins is right and he's going to be out for a while?
I do think they're going to err on the side of caution. I wouldn't be surprised if he misses 4 or 5. And to be honest with you, because of the position he plays, and big guys bang on each other the whole game. It's a lot more physical play at the position. Referees now with the hand check rule, basically guys playing like out on the perimeter deal with very little contact, but guys inside deal with a ton of contact. So I think they should not play him until he's like beyond 100%. There's like zero doubt about it. I mean, you hate to see him miss time because that's development opportunities that he's missing, but I would rather see him come back fully 100% good to go, no unreasonable risk of re-injury before that is. But and I know some Hawks fans are hoping that, for example, will Collins be in a dunk contest? That's possible if he's healthy. I went and looked last year. Derrick Jones Jr. was in the dunk contest for the Suns last year, and he had played in 6 games by that All-Star break, and then played mostly in the D League. So it's not crazy to think that Collins, if he wants to, could be in the dunk contest. And certainly, I
Oh
think the
boy.
amount the
Yeah.
amount of time he misses will probably play into whether he's considered or what have you. I have no idea what the process is for how they decide who's in it, but anyway. And then also the Rising Stars Challenge. You'd like to this draft class that he's in. It was like a loaded draft class. When you see a guy like Fultz is not even playing right now. Um, Jackson and Phoenix is not playing very well yet. De'Aaron Fox is not starting. So you're going to get those big names like Lonzo's going to play in it, and probably De'Aaron Fox is going to play in it. But when you look at that group, you'd think that he would have a good shot to play in that game. But certainly, sort of like all-star consideration when it comes down to kind of breaking ties to see who gets to play. The number of games he played and how long you've been back from injury certainly play into that. But if Hawks fans are hoping to see some kind of Hawks representation All Star Weekend, it's not going to happen on that Sunday, that's for sure. But in some of the Friday and Saturday events, Collins certainly has some opportunity, and for that kind of purpose, you'd hope he gets back sooner.
Well, I'm looking at this and I see the Hawks are currently number 2 in the terms of probability of getting a top 3 pick, number 1 pick overall. John Collins, obviously, not just one of the more fun guys to watch on the team, but he's actually like slowly becoming one of the better guys on the team. Just watch him, against on the boards against some of the teams where they think they can go smaller or something like that. But anyway, just looking at this, I'm like, the Hawks are suddenly 2 games behind, and I guess, well, game and a half behind Chicago, who has the probability for the number 1 pick. Now, I have been getting many mentions talking about the guy from Duke. I'm not sure if you're watching college basketball,
I
Glenn.
I'm aware of who the players are, and when some of the kind of quote draft internet and Twitter draft experts put videos out, I certainly pay attention to. So I think you're talking about Bagley, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And then my twin brother Greg does watch a lot of college basketball, so he had it on here when he was here, and I was able to watch Texas play. So Bamba is the kind of the top 7 projected player at Texas. So I've seen a little bit only just because Greg was watching when he was here, and then I do follow those people, that are doing video, you know,
Yeah.
creations to highlight their game and stuff like that. But it's not until probably around April or May where I start going back and watching specific players play. So I'll now that unless Greg comes back and visits for a week and puts college basketball on while I'm in the room, I'm probably not going to see a lot of it. But we certainly a lot of us rely on Patrick to bring that expertise into this
Yeah.
community, and I greatly appreciate that.
Patrick is I don't know. Do you say fortune teller? Like, what is what do we call him? Because you remember last year he said, you know who would be great on this team? John Collins. Fast forward 3 months.
Well, and it's
it's
funny
it's kind of
because
fun.
when you and I first talked about it, I hadn't really dug in yet. But when you asked me, the first name I threw out was John Collins,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
and I hadn't really seen him play, and I don't remember if that was the one you did before Patrick or after. It doesn't really matter. Patrick's voice on these things should get the most weight, but easily by far. He loves it. He's excellent at it. But what's funny is that when Brad and I and Patrick and I can't remember anyone else, we were doing all the draft profiles after the Hawks season ended on P Street Hoops, and I got John Collins. And I had
Yeah.
said to you before I really had looked at anything, John Collins could be a guy. Well, I wrote his profile and I was like, he plays zero defense, he fouls constantly, zero assists. I think he literally had less than 10 assists last season. And so he looked, when you looked at what he did at Wake Forest, you're like, well, the ball doesn't move. He's creating, he fouls a ton. He led the whole nation in PER and was a great rebounder. And certainly, I think what Patrick saw there was those are things that are most reliably translatable to the NBA. But when I watched him, I went back and researched him. I was like, no, this doesn't seem like a fit to me. And that article's still out there. And I actually had one person respond on Twitter like, "You're completely wrong about him. You're going to be eating your words." And I just replied, "Well, thank you for reading. We're all wrong sometimes." But I wasn't guessing. I wasn't. I don't.
Yeah.
I wasn't making predictions. I was just saying what I saw. But certainly, like everybody knows, when I was in summer league, I was like amazed at his passing. I was amazed at his defensive IQ, his defensive effort, the purpose and urgency he plays with. And that's certainly something you're not going to go see when you go back and watch film on a guy. Is all of that. But seeing him live, and I was like, well, okay, yeah, that draft profile I wrote on him turned out to not be kind of a forecast of what he's going to be as an NBA player. Um, and again, once again, this is an example of why, especially during the NBA season, if you want to listen to someone, listen to Patrick, not me. he was right. He was right. He saw the things that would translate, and he was kind of onto the things that a professional coaching staff might be able to help him kind of clean up, and that's absolutely happened.
Well, John, yeah, John Collins, he's still having foul issues, though. It seems like once he got put in the starting lineup, the numbers seem to have gone down. But
Well, yeah.
oh,
So to me, when he's playing at the four, he doesn't foul as much, and that's because he's not the primary rim protector. When he plays at the five, he fouls a ton still. And I know everybody says, like, for example, even like a guy like Jonathan Isaac, who's the high draft pick in Orlando, everybody wants
yeah,
him to play the five, play the five, play the five, play the five. And I think that's kind of a dumb thing. I think what you want is a guy who can slide to the five when the opposing team is trying to play fast or trying to play small, or if they're not able to play fast and small, that you go to a lineup where you're playing faster and smaller. But it's an option, not an out of the box from the first minute of the game thing. I think Collins is going to be more effective if he spends more time at the four, and when the opportunity presents itself to have an advantage by sliding into the five, do it then. That's the way I think they should handle him. Now, right now, they're all the centers are hurt, so he's going to have to play. Well, even he's hurt now, but Tyler Kavanaugh's going to have to play a lot of center for the Hawks in the next few weeks, and Plumlee as well. It's basically all they have. I don't know how close Muscala is to coming back. I haven't really heard anything on that, but right
yeah,
now, it's not a coach's choice. It's who's in the uniform. Go play center.
yeah, yeah. We might see.
Saw some Ilyasova Babbitt at the 4 or 5, and whichever one you'd call the 4 or the 5 in that lineup is just a flip of the coin, I think. So.
Hey, we're close to seeing center, small forward center, Torrin Prince play suit up. So who knows?
Yeah, well, a lot of people, and
If
even
we get
Basketball
there.
Reference, I think Basketball Reference that tracks how much in a percentage of time, and also the site Nylon Calculus has a different tracker, but Torian's played almost no power forward this year. When he's out there, for example, with Bays and two other guards,
Yeah,
Bays is the one playing the four. There's zero doubt about that. And I think they want Torian to be a three and pretty much limit him to a three. Now, can he play the four in stretches? Sure, especially on the defensive end of the court, but they don't want him playing the four offensively. We saw him try it in summer league where they ran plays for him in summer league like they ran for Millsap last year, and he was pretty bad at it. And Collins was really good in those actions. So Torian's a perimeter player on offense or a driver, drive the ball to the rim and things like that. He's not going to be a guy that plays with his back to the basket. So anyway,
yeah, yeah.
lineup minutia.
Well then, part of my conspiracy was of the whole thing was I wondered if John Collins would stay out longer because we're looking at the pick ranking, but Yeah, we know that's not going to happen.
He
But
can he absolutely can be a difference maker in some of these games, especially the ones where they're playing against the teams like Orlando and Brooklyn, like this week.
yeah,
They're gonna miss him. They're definitely gonna miss him. So
well, yeah, but I was just saying in the joking fashion of, oh, the Hawks have fallen to a game and a half back of the number one pick. So might John Collins stay out longer because we know he makes a difference. But
that's
I'm
that's
I, I'm just joking.
well.
when
And
I
the funny thing is, the team with the worst record beat the Hawks. So right now, the Hawks would only have to tie with them, and then they would. Well, does that work? If the team has the same record, does the team that beat the other one in the tie in the season series get the best top pick, or does the team that lost this season series get the top pick? I have no clue, but
you would think um you would think since it's the opposite of things that make sense, it would
right,
be whoever lost. Now, at the same time, Atlanta does have wins over Dallas and Sacramento, so
that's
and
true.
that so we will have to see on that. All
Yeah, and
right.
they're split with Brooklyn now, and we'll see how Orlando goes. I think Orlando is going to fall pretty far back into that pack too.
You think so? Okay, well that leads me to the next point. Before we wrap up, upcoming preview real quick with the Magic and the Nets. We talked about the Nets, so no real need to rehash that. But the Magic, they got off to, I guess, an impressive start for Magic. In Magic terms, they have not. They currently have 9 wins. And now you were talking about their front court. What issues did you see there, or were you saying?
Well, so basically, they're a good offensive team when Vucevic is making his perimeter shot. When he's not making his perimeter shot, they basically Frank Vogel, their coach, puts in Maurice Spates, who is happy to take perimeter shots, and he's a really good perimeter shooter for a big guy, but he's absolutely atrocious on defense as a big man. Can't move at all. And then when they put Bismack Biyombo in the game, he's really good on defense, but really gives you nothing on offense. And so most teams, most teams when they get their roster, they try to get. You want some contrasting skills, kind of, but at the center position, you want guys that probably play a little bit more alike each other, because of the
Yeah,
fact that you don't want to change the scheme when the starting center goes to the bench and the backup center comes off the bench, those sorts of things. But um, they were shooting like a ridiculous percentage the first like 10 games of the season, and they were basically as a team were shooting at a higher 3 point percentage than Steph Curry was. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to hold up. That the Magic aren't going to be as a team a better percentage from 3 point range than Steph Curry. And yeah, once they stopped making the 3 point shots at that level, and it was funny, it's because I saw the Magic play here just before the day before Thanksgiving, I think it was, and to kind of I don't want to take us all back to the Timberwolves, but you can see in that game the issue with the Timberwolves. It was 26-point game entering the fourth quarter, and the Magic got it down within 4. So they made a furious run, uh, so they can have like good stretches on offense. But since then they've lost Terrence Ross. He's probably going to be out. I'm going to guess for the whole season. Though they haven't said that, and he's one of their important offensive wings. And so, like, are they going to play more Aaron Aflalo, which is a terrible idea if you want to win basketball games? Jonathan Simmons is he going to get those minutes? So, and then Alfred Payton, he was not playing early when they were winning all those games. And you have to ask yourself, well, they stopped winning games when he came back. So, is that a thing? So it'll be interesting to see. But they look to me like a team that's just doesn't have the confidence to navigate a whole season and be confident in themselves as a group. They just look like a group that, um, the shots either go down or they don't. And when they don't, they lose. When they do, they're close. And that's about all they really are.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, that's definitely going to be something to watch coming up. So that basically wraps it up for us today. We had a couple questions. I think I saw a couple on my Twitter. Um, let's see here. I am DJ Yogi. He asks me, let's see here, early mock drafts. We kind of talked about that. We're like we're terrible people. to ask about that. However, I do want to answer that maybe in the future, and not maybe in the future, definitely in the future. Uh, okay. Here's an interesting question. What's up with Malcolm Delaney? I hmm. I don't know. Glenn, what's up with Malcolm Delaney? Why is his? I guess we don't see him as much.
Yeah, well, he's in. So they've decided to not play him as the backup point guard, and he seems to be agreeable to that, just based on some comments where he said that in his professional experience, like overseas, like when he was playing in Russia, he was not responsible for creating shots for other. He was kind of just responsible for creating his own shot, and that was the mindset that allowed him to kind of go out and be aggressive and be confident and be focused on that. And coming over here now and being a backup point guard in a, and it's funny because he plays behind Dennis Schroeder, and Dennis Schroeder doesn't create a ton of shots for his teammates.
Yeah.
But you're still initiating the offensive set and getting the team into the action. And Delaney, when he's played off the ball, has been better. But basically, when his shots are falling, he's a real good player. When his shots are not falling, he's still valuable on defense, but he's not really able to give you anything on the offensive end. And so, for example, when they're playing from behind, if he's not hitting his shots in that game, he's basically not an option. But when you look at Schroeder, Taylor, and Delaney, Delaney is a really good defensive player, especially for his size. He's incredibly smart. So this new defensive scheme they're playing has a lot of kind of matchup zone principles, and he's like better at it than anyone on the team right now. But the issue now that he's playing off the ball is that you got an expensive player like Bays. They're starting him, and then everybody's very excited about DeAndre Bembry's future. And so when Bembry came back, someone was going to lose their spot. And unfortunately for Malcolm, it ended up kind of being him. So it's going to take an injury or him just kind of putting his game back together and giving them positive offensive stretches that force Bud to kind of find opportunities to play him. But it's just kind of a math crunch right now with Bembry being available. And certainly they're very invested in Bembry's future, much more so than Malcolm's. And so that's basically Malcolm. I'm sorry, DeAndre's back. So Malcolm slid one
Yeah.
spot down in the
He
rotation, and
got voted out.
that's where he is.
It's like
Well,
like watching.
I think if you're honest, and he's pretty unfiltered, like on Twitter and Instagram and such, is he 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 played his way to that spot where he's one player out of the probably the first player out of the regular rotation. So I still love
Hmm.
him. I still love him. Want him
Hmm.
to do well. Seems like a good dude, and um, plays really hard on defense. Plays good team defense. And so when I watch him play, I root for, like when he takes a shot. He's the one player on the team where I'm like, please go in, because if his shot could just start dropping, I know he'd be a positive player and a fun player. But
That's true.
too often they don't. So far.
Yeah. Well, that seems to happen. All right. And final question before we get out of here. This is very serious, so be prepared to think. Should the Hawks change their uniforms? Um, how long have the Hawks had the current uniform layout? 2 years now.
This is our
Um,
second season, right?
second season.
Yeah, because I remember it was after the
Is their
60 win
second?
season that they had the uniform change.
Is this their second? Is this their wait? Is this their second or third season?
Yeah, I'm trying to think now.
This might be their third season with it. Yeah, because they changed it after the 60
Yeah,
wins.
yeah. They definitely did not break out the uniforms with Dwight, so it's definitely the year before Dwight. So
Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
was the 48 win season, 48 where there was like a 4-way tie for the third seed. That was the season that was their first season of these uniforms. So this is their third season. You're exactly right.
Okay. Um,
Do you like them?
I really don't. I don't. Okay, okay. We're going into my thoughts on this. I don't really mind them, um, particularly because the uniforms prior to the ones that we had now, the red, white, and blue ones, those to me seem like such a blatant ripoff of the red, white, and blue uniforms from the Olympics that I was just like, oh, come on, Atlanta, at least be unique about something. These, they're growing on me. I like the black one. I like the quote unquote charcoal, but I don't know.
I think they call it what, granite gray. I think is what they call it.
Excuse me. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Georgia Granite. I don't know what it is.
uh,
Um,
it's funny because I love the uniforms, but I hear a lot of people complain about that whatever green color they have. I forgot what they
the
call that.
Volt.
The Volt. Yeah. But here's
Yeah.
the issue: I'm blue green colorblind, so I don't see that color.
Oh.
So if
Oh.
I were not blue green colorblind, I may see what everyone else is seeing and go, "Oh God, that's too loud. That's way too weird." But it looks doesn't look very bright to me at all because I'm blue green colorblind. So
Well, jokes on you, everyone out there who wanted to comment to Glenn on this.
I love them. I love the uniforms.
Yeah, I mean, the white ones at first, I didn't know how I'd take it, and now I'm just kind of like, I like them in the sense of like it just kind of redefines like a whole kind of different, uh, not not generation, like not movement, but just like new. To me, it kind of is like new ownership, new team, new coaching, new thought process, and everything. Um, you see what they're trying to do with the arena. So it kind of just plays into that whole thing. So
The
in
whole
that
kind of
sense,
rebrand everything across the board kind of thing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, rebrand everything. And in that sense, I like it because they didn't like do like a half job to again the previous uniforms. Oh man, I really dislike those. The red, the white and blue ones.
Yeah, I
But
never even thought of it that way, like it being basically the Team USA uniforms. But not now that you mention it, like I can totally see that.
yeah, we one of the very first podcasts I was a part of on here, we talked to Steve Coonan, able to get him for 30 minutes to record, believe it or not. But Steve mentioned that those uniforms were created because of the Team USA in the Olympics. And I believe, I forgot what year it was, 2004 maybe. They based it off that because it was a very safe, quote unquote, safe design they could have followed. And I don't know. That's been my conspiracy theory for the longest time. And then when Coonan confirmed it, I was like, wow, wow. The ownership at the time was much lamer than I thought. So I don't know. That's why I dislike them. And that's why I like the current ones because it's like a total rebrand.
Yeah, and I just love the look. But again, if I were not blue green colorblind, I might not like them. I have to admit that.
Oh, great. That does it for us today. Thank you everyone for listening. Glenn, thank you for stopping by and recording with me once again. It's
My
always a
pleasure.
pleasure.
It's my pleasure too, Josh. I always have fun talking Hawks and hoops with you. So thanks for inviting me. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, definitely get you on in the future.
Yeah, and
Maybe,
then if Patrick's not like crazy busy with his teaching and coaching stuff,
yeah,
that one Twitter question you had, I think that'd be a great one for him.
it would be perfect for him. All
Yep.
right.
And I would listen
Um,
to I would listen to that just to let you know.
thanks. We will get one more viewer, maybe a couple more viewers. Who knows? But thank you, Glenn. Everybody, be sure to look out for the Schroeder report when Glenn puts it out there. Very interesting set of articles that you write. Can you plug? You want to plug your podcast one more time? The one with you and your brother.
Sure, it's easy to find in iTunes. We've got a lot of great reviews, so we rank pretty high. So if you just search for NBA podcast in iTunes or wherever you go, you're going to see it. But it's the Full Court Press NBA podcast. We call it the Full Court Press because we cover all the teams. We don't just cover the national narrative, so we're not talking about like just the Warriors and the Cavaliers and the Celtics. We talk about every team. We go deep on Chicago, Indiana, all of that stuff. So try to be a little bit different in that way and not just follow national narratives. But it's Full Court Press NBA podcast comes out every week, usually on Tuesday. So yeah, try it out and let us know what you think.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Glenn, thank you for joining me once again. And until next time, we're out of here.
Thanks, John.